Hello, everyone. Um, I am recording this video to explain the instructions and the big idea behind the data analysis project for this quarter to be released this coming Monday, right before Thanksgiving. So the way this project is going to work, rather than you writing your own analysis of data from scratch, instead, we're going to have you play the role of a data analyst or RA working under a PI, and you are going to engage with the analysis of data from a randomized clinical trial that your PI has started. So the PI has done a preliminary analysis with some errors, and it is your job to do a couple of things. One, go in, identify those errors and correct them in this report or analysis the PI has done. And then the second is the PI has asked a question for an extended analysis at the bottom of their report. And you need to take the data and then engage that extended analysis and add that analysis to the report. So there are a number of moving pieces here, and I just kind of wanted to go through them. So the first piece is the instructions, and the instructions.pdf, contains all of this discussion. And so you could just engage with instructions and get the same thing that I'm discussing now. Instructions discusses a number of additional files, though. So again, we're engaging with data from a clinical trial, although it's actually synthetic data that I created mirroring the results of a clinical trial. And so that data is in CF modulator synthetic.csv that will be up on the website, and you can engage with that. There is, in addition, this overview.pdf that explains the background of the data. So this is data on a cystic fibrosis trial, and it's actually, this is a trial of a new, really exciting treatment, a real treatment at what's called a modulator that actually ran and ended in 2019 and was a very successful trial, and it's an incredibly effective new treatment for cystic fibrosis. And again, I synthesized data to look like the data on that trial. And so this overview.pdf discusses all that data. Basically, it's data on 400 patients in this phase 3 trial, randomized to either receive this new treatment, Trikafta, in addition to standard of care, or standard of care alone. We look at two endpoints, FEV, or percent predicted FEV, ppFEV, which is one that we have talked about, and pulmonary exacerbation, which is another we have talked about. And we want to see if this treatment, as compared to standard of care, improves ppFEV and decreases probability of a patient experiencing an exacerbation. So in this overview.pdf document, again, there's background that I think will provide potential context, but isn't really necessarily needed to complete the assignment, a discussion of the study that I think will be useful for completing the assignment, and then a little data dictionary that essentially says what all of the columns in our data set are. Excellent, so you should peek at overview. Then the next piece that is discussed in instructions is this preliminary analysis.doc. And so we can open that up, and that is a PDF document that has something nominally written by your PI, who you are working with to analyze this data, and it's written in the form of a report for this collaborator you're working with, collaborator X. And so your PI has outlined these two questions, comparing Trikafta to standard of care for pulmonary function as measured by ppFEV, and comparing it to standard of care for decreasing the probability of exacerbations. And again, your PI has tried to analyze both of those questions. And then at the end, in red, writes a little note to you. Your PI sent this preliminary analysis to you and notes that they want you to extend it a little bit. In particular, there's this variable F508del, which indicates the number of mutations each patient has, either one or two, and they want you to redo the analysis in a subset of patients, the subset of patients who have only a single mutation. And again, that's a variable in the data set. And when I say redo the analysis, I mean look at both of these questions in that subset of the population in the sample. And then they also note that maybe their statistics is not up to snuff, and so they would like you to check and just make sure they didn't make any errors. Great. So we have this preliminary analysis report.pdf. We have a couple other copies of this with various knobs and bobs. I don't know. There's a phrase for that with various little tweaks. So we can look at preliminary analysis with code.pdf, and that's the same thing, only now the code is included that they used for each of these analyses. And again, they were noting that there may be errors and they want you to look for those errors. So maybe that code will help there. I also have that in a .doc form. So you can open this and it should look, again, roughly similar without the analysis, but now as a .doc file that you could edit as opposed to a .pdf. And finally, there's preliminary analysis code.r. And if we open that up, what we see is that is just the code that was in that R Markdown file, or that PDF file. So it's this short piece of code. And again, it's just precisely the code in that file in case you want to open it and engage with that code to remind yourself what it does. And again, you would engage with this code in the context of that data set. So going back to instructions for a moment. So what do we want at the end of the day for this project? What we would like is for you to, again, read up on the overview document and engage with the preliminary analysis document. Try to identify any mistakes that your PI has made. In fact, as we note in this instructions, there are 4 mistakes, 4 sort of largish mistakes that are made, 2 related to statistical analyses or R code, and 2 related to either interpretation of the results or discussion of results or the trial. So we'd like you to identify those 4 and write a short, at most like half-page little discussion of those 4 issues, and sort of, rather than just saying this is an issue, give a little bit more on why it's an issue. But again, it shouldn't be more than half-page and might be much shorter. And then we would like you to A, fix that write-up, and B, do the extended analysis. So, and create a new sort of, again, write up for a collaborator that, you would then feel comfortable sending on behalf of yourself and your PI to a collaborator who was maybe the scientific lead on this study. So again, what might that look like? And we discuss in the instructions, there are various ways you can engage with that. I think the simplest way and the way we're most expecting you to do that is basically to have a report that looks really similar to this in a .doc file or a PDF, except the first thing you've done is you've gone through this, you've removed this red area, and you've gone through this and you've just fixed all of the mistakes. So you've modified, like, I don't know, 3-4 sentences, something like that, maybe a couple more, maybe a couple fewer, so that this document is correct in terms of the results and interpretation. And then you've added maybe another 2 paragraphs engaging with this thing that your PI asked. Can you redo this analysis on this other subset of patients? So, and we're requiring that to be less than 1.5 pages. Really, though, that should be like ideally under a page, right? You don't have that much to add. And, it's in a semi-formal form here, and that's sort of what we were expecting. If instead you'd rather write this like a paper abstract, if you think that would be more useful for you, that's okay too. Just note that that's what you're going to do. So the final product that you will turn in is one document with 2 clearly delineated parts. The first is the discussion of the errors, and then, end that section, clearly delineate your ending that section, and then write the next section as if you're writing either that abstract or the report for your collaborator that then has the corrected original analysis as well as the extended analysis. Great. So one additional piece, we've been engaging in groups for most of this quarter for these labs that we have done. This is going to be slightly different, though not totally different, in that the code that you write should be your own. The write-up that you provide to us should be your own, as opposed to the labs, where we really wanted you to write like one write-up for everyone, and then just each of you turn that in. Again, here it should be your own, but as in the real world, if you have a data analysis problem, you get to talk to people and ask questions. And so you can chat with anyone you want, people in the class, people in your group, right? And try to identify these errors, understand these errors, and think about how you should code it correctly. And if you want, you can even start to think about, what the right language maybe should be in some of these pieces. Again, the write-up should be your own. You shouldn't be just copying sentences from someone else. But it's really okay to discuss that to make sure that you have a firm understanding of what you think things should look like. And you could even chat with other people in terms of the results if you wanted to verify that you were getting what you thought were the correct results. So again, the write-up and the code should be your own, but you should feel free to talk to other people. The last piece in the write-up, what we don't want is lots of spaghetti R code, right? Because your collaborator doesn't want to see lots of spaghetti R code. So again, the write-up really shouldn't have any code in the main body of it. It should look like this analysis probably rather than this one, which wouldn't be terrible, but really we want this one. And if you want to include R code, for example, to make sure that we can assess how well you understand the programmatic parts of the analysis, you can add a supplement at the end, but it should be like short and to the point and well commented. We don't want 10 pages of R code or 5 pages of R code. I mean, you should be able to do all of this in probably 15 lines of R code, but certainly no more than a page. So again, you should feel free to add that as a supplement if you would like, but not as part of the main document. There should be clear delineation, and it should be very easy for us to read through each of those 3 parts, and we will just use that code in case you had a number that was wrong. We can look at the end to see where that came from. And the easier it is for us to read through and understand the code, the easier it will be for us to assess that you actually understand things, but had maybe a slight typo. Anyhow, again, I think that it is all in the document, but I also felt like maybe this would be a useful supplement. So anyhow, good luck. You will have until, I think, December 11th, so that's the Friday before the exam starts to do this. We are anticipating that it will take no more than a couple of hours unless you really need to catch up on some of the R programming. I think for people who are very precocious with regard to R, identifying the errors could be very, very quick. Again, for people who are struggling a little bit more, that could take a little bit longer, but we don't think that this is going to be tens of hours. And if you find it's taking that long, then it may be a good idea to reach out and think about getting some help with the R coding. Great.